I'm Natalie, 34, the middle child, who never quite fit the mold my family created. For years, I accepted my role as the different one, the disappointment, the one who chose a camera over a courtroom. But when my mother publicly called me the black sheep at my brother's graduation dinner, something inside me finally broke. Years of subtle rejection crystallized in that moment, and I found the courage to look her in the eyes and speak my truth. Before I dive into this painful memory, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Have you ever been labelled unfairly by someone you love? I read every comment. Growing up in Wellesley, an affluent suburb west of Boston, meant living with certain expectations. Our colonial-style home, with its manicured lawn and pristine interior, was the perfect setting for a family that valued appearance and achievement above all else. The Hunter family had a reputation to maintain after all. My mother, Elizabeth, built her identity around success. A corporate lawyer who broke glass ceilings in the 1980s, she approached parenting with the same precision and high standards she applied in the courtroom. Her dark hair was always perfectly styled, her clothes impeccably tailored, and her expectations impossibly high. Emotions were messy and therefore unwelcome in our household. Problems were to be solved, not felt. My father, Robert, was a cardiothoracic surgeon whose schedule meant he was more of a visitor than a constant presence in our childhood. When he was home, he was either recovering from a 36-hour shift or preparing for the next one. He defaulted to my mother's judgment on most family matters, his silent approval reinforcing her methods. The rare moments of warmth I remembered with him were fleeting. A shared appreciation of a sunset, a quiet conversation about a book we'd both read, small moments that felt like stolen treasures. My older brother Michael was the golden child from the start. 3 years my senior, he seemed to absorb my parents' values like oxygen. Straight A student captain of the debate team Stanford undergraduate, followed by Wharton MBA. He checked every box my parents created, and his accomplishments were the standard against which my sister and I were measured. My mother's eyes would light up when discussing Michael's latest achievement, a warmth I rarely saw directed at me. Amanda, my younger sister, by 3 years, quickly figured out the family dynamics and aligned herself with the winning team. Harvard undergrad, followed by Harvard Law, just like our mother. Amanda was my mother's mini-me, from her choice of career to the way she crossed her legs when sitting. Where Michael received natural praise, Amanda worked for her position as the second favourite, often by highlighting the ways she was different from me. And then there was me, Natalie Hunter, the middle child, who somehow missed the achievement gene. It wasn't that I wasn't smart or capable, my grades were mostly A's and B's, but I wasn't exceptional in the ways my family valued. What I was from a young age was artistic. Where my siblings saw spreadsheets and legal briefs in their futures, I saw composition and light. My earliest memory of feeling different was in 3rd grade when I won the school art contest. My watercolour painting of our family's summer home in Maine was selected to hang in the main hallway. I raced home certificate in hand, bursting to share the news. My mother was in the kitchen with Michael reviewing his math homework. Mum, my painting won. Mrs. Abernathy said it was the best in the whole school, I announced, practically bouncing. My mother glanced up briefly. That's nice, dear. Did you finish your science worksheet? Michael just got a B+ on his calculus test, and we're working on bringing that up. A B+ in high school calculus was worth more attention than a first-place win in elementary art. That was the first time I consciously registered the hierarchy of accomplishments in our home. It wouldn't be the last. By middle school, the pattern was firmly established. Michael's debate tournaments warranted family attendance. Amanda's ballet recitals were events marked on the family calendar. My photography exhibits were things my parents tried to attend but often had conflicts arise. We're so sorry, Natalie, but your father has an important conference that weekend, my mother would say, or Amanda has a competition that day that we've already committed to. The message was clear, my passions were hobbies, not priorities. High school brought more of the same. When I was selected for a prestigious summer photography program in New York, my parents questioned whether it was worth interrupting my education, even though it was summer break. When Michael got an internship at a financial firm, the same summer they threw him a party and bought him a new laptop. It's an investment in his future, my mother explained when I asked why my program didn't warrant similar celebration. Photography is a nice hobby, but it's not a career path. The summer I turned 16, I stopped asking for their approval and started seeking it elsewhere. My photography teacher, Ms. Rivera, became the mentor I never had at home. She recognized something in my work that my family couldn't see, or chose not to. You have a unique eye, Natalie, she told me after class one day. You see people in a way others don't. That's a gift. For the first time, I felt seen. Not as a lesser version of my siblings, but as myself. By the time college applications rolled around, I had a portfolio strong enough to earn me a scholarship to Rhode Island School of Design, one of the top art schools in the country. When the acceptance letter arrived, I waited until dinner to share the news, hoping that the significance of the scholarship might finally register with my parents. RISD offered me a merit scholarship, I announced during a rare moment of silence at the dinner table. It covers almost half of the tuition. My father looked up from his plate with mild surprise. That's quite an achievement. Before I could enjoy the moment of recognition, my mother sighed. It's a shame to waste your intelligence on art school when you could study something practical. Michael, didn't you say your friend Stephen's sister went to Brown? That would be a more appropriate choice. Mom, RISD is one of the top art schools in the country, I protested. The scholarship is really competitive. I'm sure it is, dear, but we're talking about your future. Art is not a stable career path. We just want what's best for you. What was best for me in their eyes was never what I wanted for myself. Despite their disapproval, I accepted the RISD scholarship. It was my first real act of defiance, and it set the tone for our relationship throughout my 20s. I was the disappointment, the one who chose passion over practicality, the one who didn't quite understand how the world worked. The physical distance of college was liberating. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who saw creativity as valuable, who spoke my language of composition and light and storytelling through images. I thrived academically and socially, but visits home became increasingly difficult. Family gatherings followed a predictable pattern. Michael's latest promotion or Amanda's law school accomplishments would dominate the conversation. When relatives would finally turn to me with the obligatory, "And what are you up to, Natalie?" my mother would often answer before I could. "Natalie's still doing her photography thing," she would say with a tight smile that conveyed both dismissal and disappointment. "We're hoping she'll eventually consider graduate school for something more substantial." At holiday dinners, I noticed I was often seated at the extended family table rather than with my immediate family. When I mentioned this to my father once, he seemed genuinely surprised. "I'm sure it wasn't intentional," he said, but didn't offer to change the arrangement. After graduation, I moved to New York and began building my career as a photographer. It wasn't easy. I worked multiple jobs while establishing my portfolio, shooting weddings and events on weekends, while assisting established photographers during the week. Every small success was hard-won and celebrated alone, or with friends who had become my chosen family. When I sold my first photo to a major magazine at 25, I called my parents, hoping they might finally see that I was making my own way. "That's nice, dear," my mother said distractedly. "Did you hear Amanda got an internship with Judge Thompson? He rarely takes first-year law students, but he made an exception for her." The pattern continued through my 20s and into my 30s. I built a successful career, eventually specializing in portrait photography that captured the humanity in overlooked people and places. My work appeared in national publications. I won awards. I established financial independence without a penny of family support. None of it seemed to register with my family as legitimate success. The final straw came at Michael's MBA graduation dinner. After years of minimizing my accomplishments and excluding me from the inner circle of family recognition, my mother finally said out loud what had been implied for decades, and something in me refused to accept it any longer. The dinner celebrating Michael's graduation from Wharton Business School was held at Le Bernardin, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants. My parents had reserved a private room and invited an impressive guest list, extended family, Michael's friends and colleagues, even some of my parents' business associates who had known us since childhood. It was meant to be a showcase of the family's golden child, another chapter in the Hunter family success story. I arrived a few minutes late, having come directly from a photo shoot that ran over schedule. The room was already buzzing with conversation and clinking glasses when I slipped in wearing a simple black dress that felt inadequate among the designer labels surrounding me. My mother noticed my arrival with a quick frown at my tardiness, but didn't interrupt her conversation with Michael's former professor to greet me. The table arrangement confirmed what I already suspected about my place in the family hierarchy. Michael sat at the center with my parents flanking him. Amanda was next to my mother, then various important guests filled in the middle of the long table. I found my name card near the far end, seated between my mother's second cousin and one of Michael's college friends I'd never met. "Natalie, you made it!" Michael called from across the table, raising his glass in acknowledgement. At least he seemed genuinely pleased to see me. Wouldn't miss it, I replied with a smile that felt tight but sincere. Whatever our family dynamics, I was proud of my brother's accomplishment. The first course arrived and I attempted to engage in conversation with my table neighbours. Michael's friend was actually quite interesting. He worked in marketing for a tech company and had thoughtful questions about my photography. Just as we were diving into a conversation about visual storytelling in advertising, my mother's voice cut across the table. Jason, I don't believe you've met Amanda Michael's sister. She's at Harvard Law following in my footsteps. Jason was smoothly extracted from our conversation and reseated during the main course next to Amanda. My new neighbour was my father's elderly aunt, who was hard of hearing and primarily interested in telling me about her cat's digestive issues. As the main course plates were cleared, my father stood to propose a toast to Michael. It was a rare moment of public emotion from him, speaking of pride and legacy and family excellence. When he finished, glasses were raised around the table. There was a natural opening for siblings to speak, and I saw it as a chance to participate meaningfully in the evening. I stood glass in hand and began, I'd also like to toast my brother. Michael, you've always set the bar high, and while we've taken different paths. Amanda, why don't you say a few words? My mother interrupted, as if she hadn't heard me speaking. As the family's other legal mind, I think your perspective would be especially relevant. I slowly sat back down, the rest of my toast unspoken, as Amanda rose and delivered a perfectly polished speech about Michael's determination and intelligence. The moment passed, and I was once again rendered invisible. The conversation flowed around me for the next hour as dessert was served and coffee poured. My mother, always the social orchestrator, guided the discussion toward family accomplishments. She spoke glowingly of Michael's new position at Goldman Sachs, of Amanda's clerkship prospects, of the family's legacy of excellence. One of my father's colleagues, perhaps noticing my silence, politely tried to include me. And Natalie Elizabeth tells me you're in the arts. Photography, is it? Before I could answer, my mother laughed lightly and said the words that would change everything between us. Well, every family has their black sheep. Natalie has always marched to her own drummer. The table responded with awkward laughter. A few people glanced at me, with expressions ranging from pity to discomfort. My father suddenly found his coffee cup fascinating. Amanda had the grace to look embarrassed, while Michael's smile froze in place. Black sheep. The term hung in the air, putting a name to what I had felt for decades. Not just different, but lesser. Unwanted. A disappointment. In that moment, something shifted inside me. A lifetime of swallowed hurt crystallized into absolute clarity. I had spent 34 years trying to earn a place at this table, metaphorically and literally. I had tried to make them see the value in my different path. I had accepted the subtle exclusions, the dismissals, the constant message that my choices made me less worthy of celebration. I was done. The conversation had already moved on, my mother smoothly transitioning to a story about Michael's first case competition win in undergrad. No one was looking at me anymore. The black sheep had been acknowledged and dismissed, a brief uncomfortable moment now safely behind them. But I wasn't going to let it be that easy. Not anymore. I placed my napkin carefully on the table and stood up, the movement deliberate enough to draw attention without being dramatic. The conversation around me gradually quieted as people noticed me standing, wine glass in hand. My mother was still talking, unaware of the shift in the room's attention, until my father touched her arm gently. Natalie, did you want to say something? My father asked, his tone suggesting he hoped the answer was no. I took a slow breath and looked directly at my mother across the length of the table. Her expression was a familiar mixture of impatience and concern about social propriety. The face she made when she was worried someone might cause a scene. Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I'd like to respond to being called the black sheep of the family. My mother's face tightened. Natalie, this isn't the time or place for... It wasn't the time or place for you to label me that way either, Mom, but you did. I interrupted, something I rarely dared to do. So I think it's fair that I get to respond. The room had gone completely silent. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat while Amanda stared intensely at her dessert plate. My father looked like he was calculating how quickly he could end the situation. I've accepted being the black sheep for 34 years. I continued, maintaining eye contact with my mother. I've watched you celebrate their achievements while dismissing mine because they didn't fit your definition of success. I've sat at the far end of tables, I've had my conversations redirected. I've been introduced as the artistic one, in a tone that might as well have been the disappointing one. My mother's face flushed. That's not true. We've always supported. When was the last time you came to one of my exhibitions, Mum? I asked. When was the last time you asked about my work with genuine interest? When did you ever tell someone about my accomplishments with the same pride you just showed talking about Michael and Amanda? She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. I won the National Portrait Gallery Emerging Artist Award last year. I continued. My work has been published in the New Yorker Time magazine and The Atlantic. I built a business from nothing with no connections and no financial help. I support myself completely in one of the most expensive cities in the country doing what I love. I saw surprise register on several faces around the table, including my father's. They genuinely didn't know because my achievements had never been part of the family narrative. And next week, I said, I have a solo exhibition opening at the Kasha Gallery in Chelsea. It's a big deal in my world. The kind of opportunity photographers work for years to get. But you wouldn't know that, because when I mentioned it during our last family call, the subject was changed to Amanda's Law Review article. My mother found her voice again. Natalie, you're making a scene. This is Michael's night, and you're being selfish, turning the attention to yourself. I didn't turn the attention to myself, I replied calmly. You did that when you called me the black sheep in front of everyone. I'm just refusing to accept that label silently anymore. I looked around the table, taking in the mix of discomfort and curiosity on the guests' faces. I'm sorry if this is awkward for all of you. That wasn't my intention. But after a lifetime of having my choices and accomplishments diminished, I need to stand up for myself. Turning back to my mother, I continued. I'm not a black sheep. I'm just in a different flock than the one you wanted for me. And I'm done apologizing for that. I placed my barely touched wine glass on the table. Congratulations again, Michael. Your accomplishment deserves celebration, and I'm sorry this moment got derailed. With that, I picked up my small clutch purse and walked out of the private dining room, past the surprised maitre d' and into the cool New York evening. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but my steps were steady as I made my way to the street to hail a cab. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of conversation resuming, muffled by the heavy restaurant door. I had just done the unthinkable in the Hunter family. I had acknowledged the uncomfortable truth publicly. I had refused to maintain the facade of perfect family harmony that my mother had crafted so carefully over the decades. As I raised my hand for a taxi, I wasn't sure if I felt liberated or terrified. Perhaps both. The only thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't go back to being the person who silently accepted being the family disappointment. Whatever came next, that chapter was closed. The taxi ride away from the restaurant passed in a blur of streaking city lights and muffled street sounds. My body felt disconnected from my mind, hands trembling slightly in my lap as the reality of what I'd just done sank in. I'd spent a lifetime avoiding confrontation with my mother, and in 20 minutes, I'd shattered decades of carefully maintained family dynamics. You okay back there? The cabbie asked, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. I realized I hadn't given him a destination. Washington Square Park, please, I said, naming a place where I could collect my thoughts before deciding where to actually go. I'd been planning to stay at my parents' apartment on the Upper East Side, but that was obviously no longer an option. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, my phone began to vibrate in my purse. I pulled it out to see Michael's name on the screen, but I wasn't ready to talk to anyone yet. I declined the call and switched my phone to silent, watching as notifications began to stack up on my lock screen. By the time I reached Washington Square Park, I had 7 missed calls and over a dozen text messages. I paid the driver and found a relatively quiet bench near the illuminated arch. The spring evening was mild with just enough breeze to rustle the newly green leaves above me. I took several deep breaths, trying to ground myself in the physical world around me while my mind raced. Finally, I looked at my phone. The messages were a mix of reactions from those who had witnessed my stand at the dinner. My Aunt Susan, my mother's sister. Call me when you can. Been wanting to say this for years. Proud of you for speaking up. My cousin David. That was intense. You okay? An unknown number that turned out to be one of Michael's friends. Your photography sounds amazing. Would love to see your exhibition. Then there were the expected responses. Amanda, how could you be so selfish? This was Michael's night. My father, Natalie. Are you all right? Where are you? And nothing from my mother. As I was scrolling through the messages, my phone lit up with Michael's call again. This time I answered. Natalie? Where are you? His voice sounded strained. I'm fine. I said, not actually answering his question. How's the rest of the dinner going? It's over. Everyone's gone. I'm outside the restaurant. I'm sorry if I ruined your celebration, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, Michael had never been deliberately cruel to me. He had simply accepted the family dynamic as it was benefiting from being the favorite, without questioning why there had to be a hierarchy at all. You didn't ruin anything, he said with a sigh. It was winding down anyway. Silence stretched between us for a moment. What Mom said was wrong, he finally continued. The black sheep comment. That was cruel. His acknowledgement loosened something tight in my chest. Thank you for saying that. But did you have to address it right then? He asked, a hint of the old family priority system creeping into his voice. Couldn't it have waited until after the dinner? And there it was, the familiar expectation that my feelings should always be secondary, that the family appearance was more important than the family reality. When would have been a good time, Michael? I asked. When has there ever been a right time in our family to talk about how Mum treats me? He was quiet for a moment. I never thought about it that way, he admitted. I know, I said. You didn't have to. You're the golden child. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time Mom introduced you as the one who insisted on business school in a tone that suggested you'd disappointed her? Another pause. Never. Right. Look, I'm not blaming you for being her favourite. That's not your fault. But you've benefited from it your whole life, and you've never once acknowledged it or stood up for me when she dismisses my choices. I heard him exhale heavily. Where are you? I can come meet you. I don't think that's a good idea right now, I said. I need some space to process everything. Are you coming back to Mom and Dad's apartment? No, I'll find a hotel. You can stay at my place if you want, he offered. I have a guest room. I won't bother you, I promise. I considered the offer. Michael lived in a luxury high-rise in Tribeca, and while I could afford a hotel, my budget-conscious instincts made the free accommodation tempting. But I wasn't sure I wanted to be around any family members tonight. Thanks, but I think I need complete space right now. I understand, he said, though he sounded disappointed. Just let me know you're safe wherever you end up, okay? I will. As I ended the call, my phone immediately lit up again. Amanda this time. I let it go to voicemail, not ready for what would undoubtedly be a lecture about family loyalty and proper behaviour. A text from her followed almost immediately. You need to apologise to Mom. She's really upset. Of course she was. In the Hunter family, the greatest sin wasn't cruelty or dismissiveness. It was exposing those behaviours publicly. I turned off my phone completely and sat in the park for another hour, watching late-night dog walkers and couples strolling hand in hand through the iconic arch. Finally, I turned my phone back on just long enough to book a hotel room nearby and call a cab. The hotel was nothing special, just a clean, anonymous place where I could decompress. As I sat on the edge of the generic queen bed, the emotional adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation began to ebb, leaving exhaustion in its wake. I hadn't planned to confront my mother tonight, or ever really. I had spent my adult life building a separate piece, creating a world for myself, where my worth wasn't determined by my family's narrow definition of success. But hearing her call me the black sheep, so casually, as if it were an established fact everyone acknowledged, had broken something open inside me. The label she'd applied so thoughtlessly had been a weight I'd carried for as long as I could remember. And in that moment at the dinner, I'd finally put it down. I fell asleep fully dressed on top of the hotel bed, emotionally drained, but with a strange sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. Morning brought clarity along with a pounding headache. I checked my phone to find more missed calls and messages, including 3 from my father asking where I was staying. I texted him simply, I'm safe, at a hotel, need some time. His response came quickly, understand, let me know if you need anything. It was the most supportive message I'd received from him in years, which said something about our relationship. Amanda had sent several more texts overnight, each more agitated than the last, culminating in, Mom barely slept. This is so typical of you, Natalie. Creating drama for attention instead of just accepting your place in the family. My place. That was exactly the problem. My place had always been on the periphery, the odd one out the disappointment. And I was done accepting it. Michael had texted too, thinking about what you said. Never realised how different our experiences in the family were. Want to talk more when you're ready. That was unexpected. Michael had always seemed oblivious to the family dynamics, content to accept the adoration and advantages that came with being the favourite. The fact that he was even considering my perspective felt like a small but significant shift. My phone rang as I was contemplating breakfast. Unknown number. I almost declined it, but decided to answer. Hello. Natalie, it's Uncle James, your dad's brother. Uncle James was something of a black sheep himself, the only member of my father's family who hadn't gone into medicine. He'd built a successful real estate business instead, which my grandparents had considered a step down from the family tradition of medical practice. Uncle James, hi. This is unexpected. I heard about what happened at the dinner last night, he said. Your cousin Ellie was there and called me. I braced myself for a lecture about family harmony. I suppose everyone's talking about it. Good, he said, surprising me. It's about time someone called out the way Elizabeth treats you. It's been painful to watch all these years. His words landed like a revelation. Someone had seen it. Someone in the family had recognized the dynamic I'd thought was invisible to everyone but me. You noticed? I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. Of course I noticed, kiddo. The different way she talks about you compared to your siblings, the seating arrangements, how she changes the subject whenever your accomplishments come up. It's not subtle to anyone paying attention. No one ever said anything. He sighed heavily. That's on us. On all the adults in the family who saw it and didn't speak up. Your father and I have had words about it over the years, but Robert, well, he's always deferred to Elizabeth on family matters. Did Dad ever defend me to her? I asked, not sure I wanted to know the answer. In his way, Uncle James said diplomatically, your father isn't confrontational by nature, but I know he's proud of you even if he doesn't show it well. We talked for nearly an hour. Uncle James shared perspectives on the family dynamics I'd never heard before, including insights into my mother's need for control and validation through her children. He told me stories about my father as a young man, how different he was before the pressures of his career and marriage had smoothed his edges. Your exhibition next week. Tell me about it, he said as our conversation was winding down. I explained the concept behind my show. Portraits of people whose work and lives are essential but often invisible: night shift janitors, hospice nurses, subway maintenance workers, the people who keep the world running while the rest of us sleep. I'd like to come, he said, if that's all right with you. I'd like that, I replied, touched by his interest. After we hung up, I felt steadier than I had since the confrontation. Uncle James's validation helped confirm that I wasn't crazy or overly sensitive. The family dynamic I'd experienced was real, and at least one other person had seen it clearly. By mid-afternoon, I had checked out of the hotel and was back in my own apartment in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. The familiar space with its large windows and walls covered in photographs and art from friends helped ground me. This was my world, the life I'd built, despite my family's lack of support or understanding. I had just made a cup of tea when my phone rang again. Amanda. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but decided it was time to face the music. Hello, Amanda. Finally, she snapped. Do you have any idea what you've done? Mom is a wreck. Dad's walking on eggshells. Michael feels like his graduation celebration was ruined. That's not what Michael told me, I said calmly. What? I spoke to Michael last night. He didn't say anything about feeling his celebration was ruined. She paused, momentarily derailed. Well, he's just being nice. The point is, you created a huge scene and embarrassed the entire family in front of important people. Mum embarrassed me first by calling me the black sheep, I pointed out. Why is it okay for her to insult me publicly, but not okay for me to defend myself? She didn't mean it as an insult, Amanda protested. It's just a description of your role in the family. Her words hit me like a physical blow. My role. So you agree that my role in the family is to be the disappointment, the outsider? That's not what I meant, she backpedaled. Just that you're different. You always have been. You chose a different path. Okay. And why does choosing a different path make me the black sheep? Why isn't it just another valid way to live? She was silent for a moment. I don't know, she finally admitted. That's just how it's always been. And that's exactly the problem, I said. That's what I'm not accepting anymore. Amanda's tone shifted subtly. Is this about my law school graduation party? The question seemed to come from nowhere. What? No. Why would you think that? Because Mum and Dad threw me a big party and they didn't do anything when you graduated from art school. I always wondered if you resented that. The fact that she had noticed but never said anything was revealing. It's not about any one event, Amanda. It's about a lifetime of being treated as less than, because my choices didn't match Mum's vision. I guess I never thought about how that would feel, she said quietly. I was so busy trying to be perfect, trying to meet their expectations. For the first time, I glimpsed something I'd never considered. The pressure Amanda had put on herself to be the other success story in the family, to align herself with the winning team. That sounds exhausting, I said gently. It is, she admitted. Sometimes I look at you and I'm jealous. Jealous of me? The concept was so foreign I almost laughed. You're free in a way I've never allowed myself to be. You chose what you loved instead of what would impress Mom and Dad. You built a life on your own terms. Our conversation continued for another half hour, more honest than any we'd had in our adult lives. By the end, I sensed a small shift in our relationship. Not a complete transformation, but a crack in the roles we'd always played with each other. Mom still expects you to apologize, Amanda said, as we were about to hang up. Just so you know. I won't be doing that, I replied. I meant what I said last night. I'm done accepting the black sheep label and everything that comes with it. I figured, she sighed. Just be prepared for the fallout. The fallout came in the form of a call from my father later that evening. He sounded tired and uncomfortable, clearly having been deputized by my mother to handle the situation. Your mother is very hurt by what happened last night, he began. I'm sure she is, I replied. I'm hurt too, Dad. I have been for years. He was quiet for a moment. I understand that you felt overlooked sometimes. But family harmony is important, Natalie. Sometimes we need to let things go for the greater good. Whose greater good, though not mine? The family harmony has always come at my expense. That's not fair, he protested weakly. Isn't it? When has Mum ever been asked to apologise for dismissing my accomplishments? When has anyone in the family stood up for me when she makes those little cutting remarks? The harmony you're talking about only exists because I've accepted being treated as less important. He didn't have a good answer for that. What do you want, Natalie? I want to be treated with the same respect and interest given to Michael and Amanda. I want my accomplishments to be acknowledged. I want to be included rather than seated at the far end of every table. And I want Mom to recognise that her behaviour has been hurtful. You know your mother struggles with admitting fault, he said, which was as close as he'd ever come to criticising her. That's not my problem anymore, I replied. I've spent my life accommodating her inability to see her own behaviour clearly. I'm done with that. She wants you to come to brunch tomorrow to discuss this privately. I'm not ready for that, I said. And I suspect what she really wants is for me to apologise and go back to playing my assigned role. That's not going to happen. My father sighed heavily. This places me in a difficult position, Natalie. I know, Dad, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm not sorry for finally standing up for myself. After we hung up, I felt a strange mix of sadness and resolve. My relationship with my family was fundamentally changing, and that was painful. But continuing as we had been would have been more painful in the long run. The next few days passed in a flurry of preparation for my gallery opening. I threw myself into the final details, approving print sizes, reviewing the exhibition catalogue, coordinating with the gallery staff. The focus on my work was grounding a reminder of what I had built, despite the lack of family support. My phone continued to ping with family messages, which I responded to selectively. Michael and I exchanged several thoughtful texts. Amanda vacillated between defending our mother and expressing her own frustrations with family expectations. My father sent daily check-ins that were clearly his way of showing concern without taking sides. My mother sent a single text. When you're ready to discuss your behaviour maturely, let me know. I didn't respond to that one. Meanwhile, word of my exhibition seemed to have spread through the extended family network. My cousin Ellie asked if she could bring her girlfriend to the opening. Uncle James confirmed he would be there, and asked if he could bring my Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, who lived in Connecticut. Even my father's cousin, who worked in publishing, expressed interest, saying she had colleagues who followed my work. It seemed that by breaking free of my designated family role, I had inadvertently opened up new connections with relatives or tiers who had always viewed me through my mother's dismissive lens. For the first time, they were seeing me directly not as Elizabeth and Robert's artistic daughter, but as Natalie Hunter, professional photographer, with a solo exhibition at a respected gallery. The night before the opening, I received a surprising call from Michael. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, he began without preamble, about me benefiting from being the favourite and never standing up for you. Okay, I said cautiously. You were right. I didn't see it because I didn't have to. It was comfortable being the golden child. I never questioned why Mom treated us differently because the system worked for me. His self-awareness caught me off guard. That's very insightful, Michael. I should have said something all those times she dismissed your work or changed the subject when you shared good news. I'm sorry I didn't. His apology felt like water in a desert I hadn't realized I was crossing. Thank you for saying that. I'd like to come to your exhibition tomorrow, he said. Not out of obligation or anything. I genuinely want to see your work. I realized I've never actually been to one of your shows, and that's not okay. I'd like that, I said, meaning it. And Natalie, I've seen some of your magazine work online since our conversation. It's incredible. I had no idea you were so accomplished. For the first time in my memory, I heard genuine admiration in my brother's voice when talking about my work. Not pity, not polite interest, but real respect. That means a lot coming from you, I told him honestly. As I fell asleep that night, I realized that regardless of what happened with my mother, something important had shifted in my family relationships. By refusing to accept the black sheep label any longer, I had begun to rewrite not just my own role, but the entire family dynamic. Yeah. The Kasha Gallery in Chelsea was transformed for the opening night of my exhibition, Invisible Stories. My 24 large-format portraits lined the white walls, dramatically lit to highlight the dignity and humanity of each subject. The night janitor at Grand Central Station, eyes tired but proud. The hospice nurse with hands that had held countless others through their final moments. The subway track inspector, whose vigilance kept millions safe each day. I arrived an hour before the official opening wearing a simple black jumpsuit that made me feel both professional and true to myself. The gallery owner, David, greeted me with genuine enthusiasm. The early press response has been fantastic, he told me, showing me a preview of a review that would run in the Times the next day. Your work is resonating exactly as we hoped it would. I felt a familiar flutter of nerves as the staff made final preparations. This show represented years of work, a statement about who I was as an artist and what I valued. The recognition from a gallery of this caliber validated choices I'd made that my family had questioned for decades. As the doors opened and the first guests began to arrive, mostly art world people, friends and colleagues, I positioned myself near the entrance, ready to engage and explain my work. The gallery filled quickly, the buzz of conversation and clink of wine glasses, creating that distinctive energy of an opening night. About 30 minutes in, I spotted a familiar figure entering somewhat hesitantly, Michael looking slightly out of place in his Wall Street suit among the more eclectic art crowd. Our eyes met across the room and he gave me an uncertain wave before making his way over. "This is amazing, Natalie," he said, looking around at the packed gallery. "I had no idea your openings were such a big deal." "It's not always like this," I admitted. "This is a significant step up for me career-wise." He nodded, seeming genuinely impressed. "Congratulations, that's really something." "Thank you for coming," I said sincerely. "It means a lot." "I want to see your work," he said. "Guide me through it." "I don't know much about photography, but I want to understand what you do." For the next 20 minutes, I walked Michael through the exhibition, explaining my approach to each portrait, the stories behind the subjects, the technical and artistic choices I'd made. He asked thoughtful questions that revealed his genuine attempt to engage with my world. As we stood before a portrait of an overnight emergency room doctor, Michael said quietly, "I never realized how skillful you are. They're powerful, Natalie. They make me feel something." "That's the highest compliment you could give," I told him, touched by his genuine reaction. "I'm starting to understand why you chose this path," he continued. "You're really good at it. Not just technically, but you see people. You show them in a way that makes others see them too." Before I could respond, I noticed another familiar figure entering the gallery. My father, looking uncomfortable, but determined, in a sports coat and open-collar shirt. He scanned the room until he found us, then approached with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Dad," I said, surprised. "I didn't know you were coming." "I wanted to see your work," he said simply. "Is that all right?" "Of course," I replied, feeling a complex mix of emotions. "I'm glad you're here." Michael excused himself tactfully, leaving me alone with my father. We stood in awkward silence for a moment before he gestured to the photographs surrounding us. "Show me," he asked. I guided him through the exhibition, much as I had with Michael, though my father was even less familiar with the art world. He listened attentively, nodding occasionally, asking basic but sincere questions. "I don't understand art," he admitted as we paused before a portrait of a woman who cleaned office buildings overnight. "But these make sense to me. They're about people." That's exactly it, I said, encouraged by his perception. They're about seeing people who are usually invisible, acknowledging their dignity and importance. He was quiet for a moment, studying the photograph. Is that how you felt in our family, invisible? The directness of his question caught me off guard. My father had never been one for emotional conversations or self-reflection. Sometimes, I answered honestly. Often, actually. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry for that. I should have seen it happening. I should have done something about it. His apology, so unexpected and straightforward, brought a lump to my throat. Thank you for saying that. We continued through the exhibition, the initial awkwardness gradually easing as he engaged more with my work. Near the end of our circuit, he stopped before a photograph I'd placed deliberately away from the others. A self-portrait of sorts, though not obviously so. It showed only my hands holding my camera, reflected in a window with the city lights blurred behind. This one's different, he observed. It's me, I explained, or part of me. It's about being the observer, the one who sees others but isn't always seen herself. My father studied it for a long moment. It's beautiful, he finally said, and sad. It can be both, I replied. He turned to face me directly. Your mother isn't here. I didn't expect her to be. She struggles with change, with admitting she might have been wrong about something. I know that, Dad, but that doesn't excuse how she's treated you, he continued, surprising me again, or how I've allowed it to continue all these years. Before I could respond, a well-dressed older man approached us. Excuse me, are you Natalie Hunter? I nodded. James Werner from the Times. I just wanted to tell you how moved I am by your work. The way you've captured the dignity of these overlooked people is extraordinary. We're running my review tomorrow, but I wanted to tell you personally how impressive this collection is. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by his comments. That means a lot. As he moved away, I caught the expression on my father's face, a mixture of surprise and something that looked almost like pride. Was that the New York Times? He asked. Yes, I confirmed. Their main art critic. And he sought you out specifically to compliment your work. I nodded, unable to suppress a small smile. My father shook his head slowly. I had no idea, Natalie. No idea that you were this established, this respected in your field. You never asked, I said simply, without accusation. No. He agreed. We never did. As the evening continued, more guests arrived, including Uncle James and several other extended family members who had never shown interest in my work before. The gallery hummed with energy, glasses of wine were refilled, and David whispered to me that 3 of the pieces had already sold. Michael stayed for the entire event, gradually relaxing into conversations with my friends and colleagues. My father remained as well, observing it all with a thoughtful expression. The absence of my mother and Amanda was notable, but not surprising. By the time the last guests were leaving and the gallery staff began tidying up, I was exhausted but elated. The opening had been a professional success beyond my expectations, but more significantly, it had marked a shift in how at least some of my family saw me and my work. As we stood outside the gallery saying our goodbyes, my father surprised me with an awkward but genuine hug. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. I should have said that a long time ago and many times since. Thank you, Dad, I replied, blinking back unexpected tears. We have a lot to talk about, he continued. As a family, things that have gone unsaid for too long. Yes, I agreed. We do. As I watched him and Michael walk away hailing a taxi together, I felt a strange mixture of hope and caution. The family dynamic that had defined us for decades was changing, but real transformation would take time and sustained effort from all of us. What was clear, though, was that by refusing to accept the black sheep label any longer, by looking my mother in the eye and speaking my truth, I had catalyzed a change that had been needed for years. The pain of confrontation was already being balanced by the relief of authenticity, of finally being seen for who I truly was. The weeks following my gallery opening brought changes both subtle and significant in my family relationships. The exhibition itself was a professional triumph. The Times Review was glowing, several pieces sold to important collectors, and I received inquiries about commissioned work from people who had attended the opening. But it was the shifts in my family dynamic that occupied most of my thoughts. Michael and I began having regular coffee meetups, gradually rebuilding our relationship on more equal footing. Without the shadow of our mother's favoritism between us, we discovered we actually enjoyed each other's company and had more in common than we'd realized. I've been thinking about something you said, Michael told me during one of these meetings. About how Mum's approval came with conditions for you, but was automatic for me. I nodded, stirring my latte. That was pretty much how it felt growing up. I never had to question if my choices would make her withdraw her love, he said thoughtfully. That was a privilege I didn't recognize until now. Tate. His growing awareness of the family dynamics was healing in a way I hadn't expected. Being seen and understood by someone who had been at the center of the family system meant more than validation from outsiders ever could. My father too was making efforts. He called more regularly, asking specific questions about my work that showed he was paying attention. He sent me articles about photography that he thought might interest me. Small gestures, but meaningful ones from a man who had always been emotionally reserved. Amanda remained caught in the middle, torn between loyalty to our mother and a growing recognition of the unhealthy patterns in our family. We had several tense conversations where she vacillated between defending the status quo and expressing her own frustrations with our mother's controlling nature. I don't know how to be in the middle of this, she admitted during one particularly honest phone call. I've always aligned myself with Mom. It was safer that way. I understand, I told her, and I'm not asking you to choose sides. I'm just asking you to see me clearly, to acknowledge my experiences, even if they're different from yours. I'm trying, she said. It's harder than I expected. My mother maintained her distance for nearly 3 months after the confrontation at Michael's graduation dinner. No calls, no texts, just silence. According to my father, she was processing and not ready to discuss what happened. I suspected what she was really doing was waiting for me to break first to apologize and return to my assigned role, as she had always expected me to do in the past. But this time was different. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I had named the dynamic that had shaped our family for decades, and in doing so had changed it irrevocably. There was no going back to pretending everything was fine, to swallowing my hurt to maintain the facade of family harmony. I focused on my career, riding the wave of positive reception from my exhibition. I spent time with friends who had always seen and valued me for who I actually was. I started therapy to address the lingering effects of growing up as the family disappointment, the years of subtle rejection that had shaped my sense of self-worth in ways I was only beginning to recognize. What do you want from your relationship with your mother going forward? My therapist asked during one session. I want acknowledgement, I said after careful consideration, not just of my accomplishments, but of how her treatment affected me. And I want change, real change in how she interacts with me, not just temporary modifications to get things back to normal. And if that doesn't happen, she prompted, then I need to accept that and build a life with appropriate boundaries, I replied. I can love her without allowing her to diminish me. The opportunity to test this resolve came sooner than I expected. 3 months after the confrontation, my father called to invite me to lunch. Just you and me, he clarified. There are some things I'd like to discuss. We met at a quiet restaurant near his office. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his napkin in a way that reminded me suddenly of myself. Your mother would like to meet with you, he said after we'd ordered, to talk about what happened. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. Did she send you to arrange this? No, he said, surprising me. She doesn't know I'm talking to you about it. This is my initiative. That was unexpected. My father had always been the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over rather than taking an active role in addressing family conflicts. Why now? I asked. He was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. I've been doing a lot of thinking since your exhibition. About the kind of father I've been, the kind of family we've created. I'm not proud of what I've realized. His honesty caught me off guard. What do you mean? I've enabled your mother's behavior for decades, he admitted. I saw how she treated you differently than your siblings, how she dismissed your choices and accomplishments, and I did nothing substantial to stop it. I made excuses, that it was just her way, that she didn't mean to hurt you, that family peace was more important than addressing the problem directly. I nodded, appreciating his candor. That's accurate. After seeing your work, meeting your colleagues, understanding what you've built for yourself, despite our lack of support, I'm ashamed, Natalie. I failed you as a father. The words I had longed to hear for so many years brought tears to my eyes. Thank you for saying that, I managed. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it. I've been talking to your mother, he continued. Really talking, not just smoothing things over. It hasn't been easy. She's defensive, hurt, convinced that she's the wronged party in all this. That sounded exactly like the mother I knew. But she's also lonely, he added. She misses you. And I think, though she wouldn't admit it directly, she's starting to recognize that she might lose you permanently if something doesn't change. What are you suggesting? I asked cautiously. A meeting. Just you and her on neutral ground. I'm not asking you to pretend everything is fine or to accept anything less than a genuine acknowledgement from her. But I think it's worth trying for both of you. I considered his words carefully. The old Natalie would have jumped at any opportunity to repair the relationship, even at the cost of my own dignity. But I wasn't that person anymore. I'll meet with her, I decided. But I need you to understand that I won't be compromising on what I need from her. If she's expecting me to apologize and go back to accepting the black sheep role, it won't go well. I understand, he said, and I believed he did. All I'm asking is that you give her a chance to meet you halfway. We arranged for my mother and me to meet at a cafe the following weekend. I spent the days leading up to it preparing, emotionally discussing strategies with my therapist and reminding myself of the boundaries I needed to maintain. When the day arrived, I got to the cafe early, choosing a quiet table in the corner where we would have some privacy. My mother arrived precisely on time, as she always did. At 60, she was still elegant and put together, not a hair out of place, her expression carefully composed. But I noticed something different in her eyes, an uncertainty that was new. Natalie, she said as she sat down across from me, thank you for agreeing to meet. Thank you for suggesting it, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. An awkward silence fell between us. In the past, I would have rushed to fill it to ease the tension to make her comfortable. This time I waited. Your father tells me your exhibition was very successful, she finally said. It was, I confirmed. The reviews were excellent and several pieces sold to important collectors. She nodded. That's wonderful. You must be proud. I am, I said simply. Another silence stretched between us. I could see her struggling with the unfamiliar dynamic. I wasn't filling the spaces, wasn't working to make this easy for her. Natalie, about what happened at Michael's dinner, she began, then paused. I never intended to hurt you. It was the classic non-apology I had expected. What did you intend by calling me the black sheep of the family in front of everyone? She looked taken aback by my directness. It was just an expression, a joke. Jokes are funny, but I pointed out. No one was laughing, Mom. And it wasn't just an expression. It was a label you've applied to me my entire life, just not usually so explicitly. That's not fair, she protested. I've always supported you. Have you? I asked. When was the last time you attended one of my exhibitions before I forced the issue? When did you ever talk about my accomplishments with the same pride you show discussing Michael and Amanda? When did you ever truly try to understand the path I've chosen instead of constantly suggesting alternatives you found more acceptable? She was silent. Her lips pressed together in that familiar way that indicated she was holding back words she considered unwise to speak. I don't need you to answer those questions right now, I continued more gently. But I do need you to actually think about them, because the pattern has been clear to everyone except perhaps you. Your Uncle James called me, she said unexpectedly. He was quite direct about his observations of how I've treated you over the years. That surprised me. Uncle James hadn't mentioned intervening directly. He suggested I might consider why I've found your choices so threatening, she continued, why I've needed to diminish your path in order to validate my own. This level of self-reflection was unprecedented from my mother. And have you considered it? She looked down at her untouched coffee. I've thought about little else for 3 months. What have you concluded? I pressed gently. That perhaps, she began, then stopped, visibly struggling. That perhaps I've been unfair to you, that I've held you to a different standard than your siblings, that I've been unable to see your accomplishments clearly because they didn't match what I wanted for you. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the harm she'd caused, but it was more than I had ever expected to hear from her. I grew up believing success had a very specific definition, she continued after a moment. Academic achievement, professional status, financial security. When you chose a different path, I saw it as rejection of my values, my choices. It felt personal in a way I couldn't articulate. It wasn't about you, Mom, I said. It was about me following my own gifts, my own passion. I see that now, she admitted. Or I'm trying to. It's not easy to reconsider beliefs you've held your entire life. We talked for over 2 hours, covering ground we had never explored together. She shared stories from her own childhood that helped me understand her rigid definition of success, her parents' financial struggles, her fight to be taken seriously as a female attorney in a male-dominated field, her fear that any deviation from a proven path would lead to failure. I shared how her dismissal of my choices had affected me the years of feeling less than the constant need to justify my existence in a family that seemed to value only certain kinds of accomplishment. It wasn't a magical reconciliation. There were difficult times when she slipped back into defensiveness or seemed unable to truly hear what I was saying. But there were also breakthroughs, brief windows of genuine connection and understanding that had never existed between us before. "I can't promise I'll change overnight," she said as we prepared to leave. "These patterns are deeply ingrained." "I don't expect overnight change," I assured her. "What I need is ongoing effort and awareness, and acknowledgement when you slip back into old patterns." "I can try," she said. "Will you be patient with me?" "Within reason," I replied honestly. "I'll recognize genuine effort, but I won't accept being diminished again, even subtly. I've drawn that line, and I need to maintain it for my own well-being." She nodded and for the first time that day reached across the table to briefly touch my hand. "I don't want to lose you, Natalie." I'm beginning to understand how close I came to doing just that. In the months that followed, we began the slow, sometimes painful process of rebuilding our relationship on new terms. There were setbacks, moments when she fell into old habits, and I had to point them out, times when I was oversensitive to perceived slights that weren't intentional family gatherings, where tension still simmered beneath the surface. But there was progress too. She attended my next exhibition, opening visibly uncomfortable in the art world setting, but making a genuine effort to engage. She asked questions about my process, my inspiration, my goals for future projects. She caught herself mid-sentence once when she started to make a dismissive comment about the financial stability of artistic careers. The first family dinner after our reconciliation was awkward but significant. My mother had clearly made an effort to seat everyone equally at the table, to include me in conversations to acknowledge my recent professional achievements. It wasn't perfect. Old habits surfaced occasionally, but the effort was visible and meaningful. After dinner, as we were helping clear the table, Amanda pulled me aside. "This is weird," she whispered, gesturing vaguely at the changed family dynamic. "But good weird, I think. Mum asked me about your exhibition yesterday, like actually asked with real interest." "Progress," I agreed with a small smile. "I'm sorry I didn't see it clearly before," she added. How differently she treated you. It was easier to go along with it than to question it. "I understand," I told her. We all played our assigned roles. It's hard to step outside them. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past months. The confrontation at Michael's graduation dinner had been painful, frightening, a breaking point that could have permanently fractured my family relationships. Instead, it had become a catalyst for change that was long overdue. I still carried the scars of growing up as the black sheep, the family disappointment. In quiet moments, I sometimes still heard my mother's dismissive tone, still felt the sting of being overlooked, still doubted my worth in ways that therapy was slowly helping me address. But I was no longer defined by that label. By refusing to accept it any longer, by looking my mother in the eye and speaking my truth, I had begun to rewrite not just my role in the family, but the entire family narrative. The process wasn't complete and perhaps never would be entirely. Family patterns established over decades don't disappear overnight. But we were moving forward with greater awareness, with more honesty, with a willingness to see each other more clearly. And I had discovered something powerful in the process. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and ultimately for others, is to stand firmly in your truth even when it disrupts the comfortable patterns that have held you all in place for far too long. Sometimes love requires not smoothing things over, but bringing them to light. Has standing up for yourself ever changed a relationship in your life? Let me know in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes the labels others give us say more about them than about us. Thank you for listening to my story.